Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today I have Adam Patrick on the show from Yer Talkin Over Me. Adam has been involved in a lot of these more controversial conversations on libertarianism, post-libertarianism, agorism. Praxis in general is his focus, and how to utilize political strategy. He's also talked a bit about the mystical side of things and mysticism, religion. And I always find him interesting to listen to. So I wanted to have him on and have a conversation with him about libertarianism, where the Libertarian Party is going wrong, how to utilize libertarian philosophy in a more applicable way, and what that actually looks like and means. So we had a good conversation, as usual. It did not stay on track. We go all over the place because the way my mind works. And sometimes I'm bad at steering these conversations because I'm not really sure what anybody else wants to hear. I'm just curious. I'm just talking about what I want to talk about. So I hope y'all enjoy this. I really enjoyed talking to Adam. He's a very thoughtful person and very interesting to speak with. So it was a really enjoyable conversation. I titled the podcast The Freedom Fork, not because that term ever came up, but that's what it feels like we're talking about, how the hard fork of libertarianism, similar to the hard fork of Bitcoin. So I hope y'all really enjoy this. I enjoyed the conversation, and Adam's a great dude, and I would love to have him on again. Really enjoyed talking to him. As always, RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. Go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a sometimes libertarian and a shitty anarcho-capitalist, but he's a great graphic designer, and I love the dude. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quinones' podcast logo for Free Man Beyond the Wall. So go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. Fuck Top Lobster. Just kidding. Yeah, I shouldn't say just kidding. If y'all don't know I'm fucking kidding, y'all can suck my dick. Anyway, thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Oh, yeah. Buy Ryan's book, Project Manicore, at RyanBunting.com. Also, if you'd like this show without any advertisements, go to Patreon.com/TD Salmons and become a patron. I appreciate everybody's support, and it's really helping me out. And my wife is very thankful to all of you as well. So go to Patreon.com/TD Salmons, not only to hear this show without advertising, but also to get your. I done told you you're talking over me. No, I'm not gonna publish Adam's podcast. Sorry, I done told you with my wife Beatrix Berger, and all the shit talking we get into. We get into all kinds of stuff, and it's very much like just an average conversation we would have on our porch and just enjoying ourselves and laughing and, getting at each other's throats and poking and prodding each other and talking shit. That's just the way we are. So go to Patreon.com/TD Salmons to access I Done Told You. Enjoy the show. Computer. Recording in progress. There she goes. That's my Fed talking to me. And I am here with Mr. Adam Patrick. What's going on, dude?
What's up, brother? Thanks for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. It's been one of those situations where it was just bound to happen. We were going to do this one way or the other. And we finally got there. and it just took me going, okay, I just have to sit down with about 30 hours of your talking to me over the week and just listen to
I'm sorry.
what is happening. No, and the fact of the matter is I've heard you on Free Man Beyond the Wall,
Mm.
right? So I knew you're kind of, and I don't know if I necessarily like the term, but you're part of the kind of post-libertarian movement.
Hmm.
And
Maybe.
me, yeah, I mean, I would guess. That's just kind of my take of it. I don't know if I necessarily like the term, and so I'm not going to sit there and like throw these labels on people. I don't. I'm an agorist, or I view myself more as an agorist, but I do it more from a homesteading point of view. I kind of stay away from the um, from all the technology as much as possible, except for this. And this still drives me fucking crazy, every chance it gets. So I kind of was like, okay, I don't know. I might be missing something. All right, but I think what I'm hearing from the post-libertarian point of view is basically a modern day breakdown of Harry Brown's How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. That's what I'm hearing.
Hmm. Would you say maybe agorism is a better modern day breakdown of that book
I
rather
think
than what we're
I
doing?
I think I think both are kind of a break off of the same book. I
Hmm.
think I think you're I think we're looking at the same things and trying to figure out ways in which we can better our own lives.
Yeah. No, I would say that's true. I don't know where the post-libertarian thing came in. I actually ended up Googling it one day just to see what other people thought that it meant. And I found so many differing definitions of it, and I didn't really subscribe to any of them. So if I had to think of a way to define it, it would be looking at the idea of libertarianism as it is, or as as it's generally understood by many different people, and seeing that it maybe isn't as fulfilling as I once thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it took COVID, the lockdowns, 2020 for that concept to sort of start expanding or breeding in my brain.
Yeah.
And because I'd called myself a libertarian or philosophically anarchist. And, you have the ANCAP flag there, the patchwork quilt, and I have an anarchy A on my shoulder. I mean, I've always been that guy. And, but there was just something about it that I don't
By
know.
the way, that quilt is fucking cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a gift. A gift from somebody I don't talk to anymore, but it was a very nice gift. But the whole idea of the whole concept of libertarianism and right wing anarchism or anarcho capitalism just left me missing something. I just felt like if this was such a beautiful thing, and it is a beautiful thing when you think about it in theory, if it was so beautiful, why does nobody accept it? Why does nobody pay attention to it? Why do very few people live their lives this way? And even when you look at ANCAPs, why do so few ANCAPs live their life as if, you know, as if Ancapistan in their head was possible? And I just don't see it playing out. And so that was for me, it was just to delve into kind of cycles and patterns of human history, why people do what they do, what our incentives are, and try to figure out ask a bunch of questions humbly, try to find some answers, and certainly not think that I know everything. So that was kind of my approach. And it seems like a bunch of other people had sort of the same misgivings, but they all came at it from a bunch of different directions. And then we kind of found ourselves and we were going, okay, well, why doesn't libertarianism work, quote unquote, for us? And just ask the question and then see what answers develop. Beautiful dog, by the way.
Thank you. He thinks just because I'm speaking, it's his turn to be involved.
I have an old English bulldog and a fox red lab, and they're locked in another room. Otherwise, they'd be doing the same thing.
He's trying to knock me out of the chair right now.
What kind of dog is that?
He's a pit.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's got like big
Yeah,
big one though.
yeah, he's about 90 pounds.
Hmm.
When if you have you ever listened to like Slurp Gang or any of that?
A little bit.
Okay, so when Nick is talking about me walking up at Childeberg with two dogs, I got two of these on a leash.
Oh my
And-
lord.
yeah,
Jeez.
yeah,
What a beast. I love it.
yeah, he's a monster, and he's just looking for attention. He's like, okay, you're talking, so I got to know what's going on. So,
Well, he'd make a great libertarian if he's looking for attention.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, so I think, all right, I think my interpretation might be slightly different
Okay.
than what you're breaking down. So I just kind of want to run this by you, and you're we come from like kind of the same camp of thought. All right, we both understand that we are not the smartest person in the room, like by any stretch of the imagination. I hear you say it all the time. Like, I don't even know how I ended up in this conversation. I'm not near as smart as some of these guys. Like, I hear you say it all the time.
Mm.
I'm kind of the same way. I'm like, I'm good at having a conversation. I'm not good at being the smart guy. Like, that's not my thing, right? So I think what's happening with libertarianism is David Nolan broke it down, and David Nolan said that libertarian was evangelical at its core, right? So he was one of the founders of libertarianism. He was in the living room with Murray Rothbard. It was actually his living room they were in when they developed the idea of the Libertarian Party.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, like what is happening? Like what are we looking at? What are we dealing with? And my reading of libertarianism is that politics is antithetical or useless to an extent. And so my immediate reaction was to start going the agorist route. That was immediately what I started doing. As soon as I figured out what agorism was, I just started going that route.
Mm.
But I think there are people that believe, and I don't know if this is with just a just belief that they can make a difference in the political spectrum. So this is kind of where I have a problem. And it's not where I have a problem with people acting politically, because I'm the first one to admit I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to work. I don't know. I have no clue. But do you think that the political acting on a political level can actually have an influence?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But you can't do it and be a libertarian at the same time. And that's really
What do you
been,
mean by that?
I mean, yeah, that's really been the thing that I've awakened to the last year and a half.
Let's break that down, because there's a lot of things that have been said here recently that a lot of people are taking out of context, and I don't want to put you in a situation where you're saying something and then people are like, oh, well, he said you can't be a libertarian and be effective, you know? So what do you mean by you can't be politically active and a libertarian at the same time? What does that mean?
Well, I guess it really depends on how you're going to define libertarianism. So I'm sure I'm going to give a definition at some point that someone's going to disagree with, and it is what it is. And I don't mean any, ill will toward anybody for thinking differently. It's not a condemnation of them. It's
Right.
just an opinion. I'll try to back it up the best I can. So
Yeah,
the idea of libertarianism is, don't hurt people and take their stuff. It's a personal philosophy. It's very much aligned with the life of Christ, or like philosophically anarchist. It's voluntarism. All ideas, all interactions, all transactions should be voluntary between consenting individuals or adults.
Right.
I don't see how that's applicable to the political world, because in politics nobody's playing by that game.
Yeah.
So you certainly can go into politics with don't hurt people and take their stuff as your praxis, as your mentality, right? But you're not going to achieve anything there. I mean, or it is very highly unlikely that you're going to achieve anything there. It is possible that you might be the right type of voice, like Jesus Christ or something, to spark some sort of world religion 2,000 years from now, but the chances are highly unlikely that that's going to happen. So my theory, or I will posit here, that libertarian beliefs, or living your life as a libertarian truly, does not lend itself well to what it takes to achieve power, wield power responsibly or otherwise in the political world.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense, and I think that's kind of like my thing. It's kind of like there's no point in cooperating in a system that doesn't want you to be cooperating in it, and that you should take the responsibility on yourself to do what you have to do, right? So I spent a lot of time on Twitter today talking to people about Monsanto, and I was like, but who fucking cares? And they're sending me lawsuits. Like Monsanto is suing small farmers. And I'm like, okay. Like, fuck Monsanto for suing small farmers, right? Like, I'm not defending Monsanto. I'm saying avoid Monsanto. Like, get away from Monsanto. Like, run as far as you can from these people that are trying to. But I don't think that you can engage these people directly and make any kind of headway. Personally, I just don't. I don't think that. I think they have scripted this game to an effect where if you directly like engage, then it only benefits them.
So, okay, so that's a good example of why, and this is not a you thing, but more of a King's you. But
Yes. Yeah, I get you.
one of the reasons that libertarianism wouldn't work in politics is because, yes, it would be conceptualized as charging head on into battle to slay the evil beast. And that's not what politics is. If you wanted to manipulate or change Monsantos's, I don't know, social, business, or economic programs, then you wouldn't just go at them and try to burn them down with a flamethrower. You would have to maneuver through the political avenues and systems and glad hand with the right people and make connections all around the world in order to incentivize them to get where you wanted them to go. Well, that requires you to be like incredibly Machiavellian. And libertarians in general just don't have that sense of self. They're not attuned to that avenue. And that's okay. That's not a problem for that. As a matter of fact, I actually appreciate that they don't want to do it, or that it isn't something that would strike them as advantageous. I would advise don't do that. But you can look at somebody like, I don't know, like a Steve Bannon, and you can say, if you really want to influence global geopolitics, you have to play a long game, and you have to glad hand with people who maybe you agree or disagree with, depending on the situation. If you want to sway things, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And libertarians just don't have that kind of impetus, and they probably shouldn't.
Do you think that principles must be put aside to make headway here?
No, they only have to be put aside if you want to play politics. Right? You either put them aside and play politics, or you adhere to your principles and you go off and this has been so
this is where libertarians really have a problem, though. Like, they don't want to lay their principles aside. They want to be principled and engage in politics.
Yeah, that's not possible.
And
well, it's
no,
not
and I agree with you, like that. It's like not. It just they don't mesh. These two things don't mesh.
They don't. I shouldn't say it's impossible. It is highly improbable that you are going to be the human that transcends the ability to not be principled in politics. Like, it is possible that you could do it, but the greatest people we've seen in American history who have tried to transcend politics by having principles and morals are marginalized at best in the overwhelming community. Right.
And what struck me was, and the reason this came up in my mind is I saw Dave Smith a while back engaged somebody, and Dave Smith says, oh no, this was on CNN or on Fox, and he's saying, I stand on my principles. What principles do you stand on? And the guy didn't answer him, obviously, because that's not what politics is.
Mm. Yeah, I've been batting Dave Smith around in my head for a while, and I've never actually talked to him face to face, or really even aside from a couple of Twitter conversations. The idea that you would end the Fed, end the Department of Education, end the foreign wars. A lot of libertarians, maybe more so in like my little circle, would say that's ridiculous, or it's giving power to the state, or when you go against the state, you're allowing it to achieve more power. You're giving it power, right? Like by the very fact that you're paying attention to it. And of course, they're not going to let you do that. But like, what if you could do that? What if you could like Machiavellia your way into the presidency and like literally do that? Because all right, well, like what if Trump had done that? Because Trump won. What if he had gone into the White House and he had Dave Smith's platform and he had just decided to do that shit? Like, it's not impossible for that to happen. I don't think you could. I think it'd be very difficult to get there with that message. But if you weaseled your way in with a different message, a more Machiavellian message, and you got in there and you literally just ended the Fed, ended the wars, fired everybody, and became the dictator of America, like Trump should have done, or like Dave probably would want to do if he were in that situation. Great. Let's do that.
Yeah.
I'm totally down with that. I will support that all day and all night. I won't sleep for a week supporting that. I don't know if the people who say those things have the tenacity or intestinal fortitude to go through with them. I think once it might become even like a tangible reality, they'd probably freak themselves out about it and be like, oh shit, this has a chance of happening. I mean, that happened with Trump too. You had Trump supporters globally, like big name power brokers globally in geopolitics, who went, oh my God, Trump won? Well, fuck, shit, now we have to do something.
Yeah.
And they freaked out, right? And then, of course, they didn't, Trump didn't really do anything. But the idea that you could get into the White House and end the Fed, well, of course you could. You just have to get there, and then you have to do it. So I'm totally down with that. I just don't know how serious people are when they say those things. I think they might be saying them from the point of view they know it's not really ever going to happen, and it's going to attract a lot of listeners to a show. But if you want to do it, well, fuck, go do it. That's great.
Yeah. One of the things I asked a friend of mine, I'm not going to put anybody out there, but I was looking at what was happening, and I'm listening to the messages that are coming from Dave, and I asked, I was like, is Vin Armani right? Like, is Dave Smith one of these guys that if he attained power, he'd be easily bought off? Because he's never had power of any sort. Wouldn't know what to do with it. You know? And so would he be easily steered?
So I'm not nearly as provocative as Cyprian, formerly Vin Armani, is, even though
I can't call him Cyprian. I'm sorry.
Right,
I can't remember that name to call him that.
I mean, it resonated with me because I'm familiar with the saint that he's referencing. But okay, so even though I've talked with Vin a bunch, we're not like friends. We are friendly. I'm not nearly that provocative. I don't know. I mean, I have said on shows before that I think you have to be careful who follows you. And that means that you should maybe not be so, you shouldn't want people cheering you so loudly when you're starting to play politics as opposed to entertain them. I think that's a little bit of humility that should sink into people. You can sort of see a Machiavellian in the way they respond to accolades, as opposed to somebody who's used to being an entertainer. I think it can be dangerous when you're an incredibly good person with solid morals who means well, and has not a malicious bone in their body. to go through something like this and end up hurting people through no fault of their own when they're not intending to do so. I do think that is a valid criticism, but I would have no way of knowing if that will or won't happen. I mean, it's more likely to happen than not, just because people tend to be more followers than leaders. I hope it doesn't happen. I would argue, though, from the point of view of accelerationism, that the best thing that could happen to the Mises Caucus is for them to be designated terrorists and hunted down by the US federal government. That's probably the best outcome they could possibly have in the political world.
Well, I mean, they're halfway there. I mean, you got John Brennan going on and saying that, you know, libertarians are domestic terrorists. And it kind of makes you wonder, it's like, what is the purpose of saying something like that? Why would you come out and say something like that?
Well, here's my opinion on that. I don't think he's talking about us. I think he's talking about people who were at the Capitol on January 6th waving the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. And he like quick Googled his CIA thing and was like, what are these people? And the search engine popped up libertarian. And he is associating that. He's not.
I'd rather
I don't
he's
think
talking
he
about
knows.
us.
Let's say it again.
I said I'd rather he's talking about us.
Yeah, I don't think it's that nuanced. I don't think these people really have an understanding of how nuanced all of this is. They're probably just looking at the most provocative name people out there. They might think, for all I fucking know, they think Richard Spencer's a libertarian.
Yeah,
they're not that intelligent, people in the intelligence business. Just having worked with them a little bit in the military, they're not that smart.
Unironically,
they're like the dumbest human beings you could possibly work with.
Yeah. So, all right, I want to move a little bit, because one of the things I heard on your podcast is, I can't remember the guy's name. Forgive me. He did a great job, but y'all were talking about the cycles. And one of the books I just ordered it should be here soon, is the book on the fourth turning. I was told by Coop and Matt Erickson that I must read this, and I was like, okay, I'm going to read it. And so I ordered it like the next day. So I'm not familiar with these cycles, but the guy you were talking to was talking about the archetype of the commoner or the peasant, and how that's coming back around. And I'm wondering, I've noticed a lot of people are more in, I don't know if in tune is the right way to say it, but there are a lot of people that are talking about growing their own food, doing their own thing. And is this part of these cycles? Like, are we living through one of these cycles?
So the fourth turning, this is a good question, because I don't necessarily subscribe to a lot of those cycles and patterns, although I understand where they're coming from. I think this cycle is a little bit bigger than that, but the idea of the commoner, the way I understand it, is, I guess the best analogy would be something like blue collar, working class, rural, middle of the country Americans. Would be something like that's the group of people that are now going to to rise up. This would be Steve Bannon's interpretation, for example. This would be the traditionalist approach, or the Western traditionalist approach. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I like to think it might be, but I like to think on kind of a bigger scale of cycles, which is human beings, like literally anything that exists in the world, work toward entropy. There's always violence and destruction in our wake, the same way it is with literally everything. If you smash a glass on the ground, it doesn't magically turn back into one when you turn your back. And what I see is a pattern toward this globalist, individualist, every human being is their own God approach, that if you look at historical cycles and patterns, whether in the Bible, the Quran, Eastern mysticism, or just literally in Western tradition, that tends to end very poorly. That cycle, to me, is more important than things like the fourth turning, because the fourth turning is more of a social cycle, and it's one of those patterns that's very predictable, but it's not necessarily that important, right? Like, we kind of know what the next generation's going to do, but we don't know how it's going to impact us yet. So I don't focus so much on that as I do on where I think humanity is headed, which I think is the inevitable destruction of Western governance based on this idea of individualism and globalism. I think that cycle is more important to pay attention to, but that doesn't invalidate any of the other ones. It just means that's where I focus my energy.
Well, help me with this, because one of the things, my wife and I were having this conversation last night. All right. She's an atheist. I've always, like, well, not always, but for the last, I'd say 6-7 years, I've identified as agnostic. Right. And one of the things Coop said in this episode I did with Coop and Matt Erickson and Ace was, God is reality. And I'm looking at what he's encompassing in this statement. And I'm trying to put together in my mind what is it, these guys are so much smarter than me. Like, I couldn't even tell you like how much smarter than me they are. I was like a spectator of this podcast. I like, even though it was my podcast, I was a spectator because I was like, these guys are fucking brilliant, and I'm just gonna sit here and soak up as much information as I can. And so I'm looking at what he's saying when he says God is reality. What he's saying is there are these inescapable forces that are playing, that operate in life. And you have to interact with these things. Period. One way or the other. You're going to have to interact with them in one shape or form. Now, I've always kind of looked at nature in that way, you know, kind of, maybe that's because of the way I look at Native Americans and have the respect for Native Americans and the Great Spirit, you know, kind of concept. But I don't feel like I can, in good faith, identify what it is that is being told to us through these stories.
Well, I think you might find some solace in the idea of capital T traditionalism. If I'm trying to pick through my brain of an ideology that might answer some of those questions for you, not saying they answer them, universally, but there's something about the idea that there is a universal knowledge that, the human mind at its limit, it's the idea of it being limited to what it is biologically. There's a universal truth that we max out at attaining, that there is no more we can attain than that, how we have evolved. And that every religion or every society is attempting to achieve that truth in numerous and different ways.
Right.
And the way to sort of get there is to go backwards, not forwards. That progressing or growing society linearly, from one point to and progressing to a more enlightened point is not the way to go. That the further we get along this timeline of enlightenment, honestly, the further we get from the quote unquote truth. I think there's a lot to that. I wouldn't align myself with traditionalists because they all tend to be really weird. If you kind of look into them, they're all very different. And I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of irrelevant to the question.
Do they take mushrooms? Because that's what's important to me.
Well, many of them do.
Okay.
Actually do.
Well, I'm a traditionalist.
But everybody should. Everybody should do hallucinogens.
Everybody should
points in their life. That's crucial.
But
the idea that they're,
think, I'm sorry, here's something I bring up hallucinants and my mind goes fucking astray. So just allow me one question real quick. I remember reading in the Bible, the different descriptions, if people don't know, Adam has spent a lot of time discussing the Bible on his podcast. So I'm asking him because he might have more insight than I do. I remember reading the Bible and there are these descriptions of angels and they're off the wall. Some of them, just Like, what are you talking about? He's a will with eyes, you know, like, what's happening here? Do you think there is, at some point, at least in these stories, the contribution of hallucinants to bring forward these visions?
It's certainly possible. I mean, Brian Murescu wrote The Immortality Key. I read it, I think last Christmas or 2 Christmases ago. It might have been last year. And he basically ties, Christianity specifically, but global religions almost entirely to hallucinogens, and based a lot off of the work of somebody I can't remember the name of. Sorry. So, but that book is absolutely fantastic. Side note, the only person who's ever declined to be interviewed on You're Talking Over Me was Brian Murescu. But the book, I would say people should check it out.
Brian.
Yeah, but we're Facebook friends too, which is weird. But no, the book is cool. It ties in the Eucharist with hallucinogens. It ties in the mysteries of Eleusis, the Greek island of Eleusis, with Christianity, and how, Christianity has this trend of sort of encapsulating the other religions that it defeats, and then bringing aspects of it into itself, and then using that as a way to sort of get people from those religions into Christianity. But he focuses the entire book on like the Amanita muscaria mushroom and how it relates to Santa Claus and the reindeer, and then how that relates to Christianity. I thought it was absolutely fucking fascinating. And if you look at just the history of medicine, I mean, so many of those things from mind-altering drugs, they started out that way, like ayahuasca, experiences. I think that it couldn't possibly be ignored.
Yeah. I didn't mean to sidetrack you too much. I don't know if you can remember what you were saying prior to that, but there's just, we start talking to hallucinants, and I'm like, there's so much there. There's so much
sidetracked. That's fine. No, I think that, so I've had 2 ayahuasca experiences, and they were the year following both, the 12 months following both of those experiences were the most peaceful years of my life. There was something about just like literally purging all of this bullshit out of your mind that frees you up to have these beautiful ideas. And there's a cycle to that too. Like, why is that? Well, why is taking this fucking pukey drug that you just vomit for 12 hours and think you're why does that achieve? I mean, ultimately, almost with everybody universally, same outcome.
Why the hell do I want to keep taking it?
Then you start to, the 13th, the 14th month, you start to like come back down to earth, and you realize like, I don't want to deal with all that. And then that has got to lead you to the point where you go, why is this so unnatural? What world are we living in that is so unnatural that it's constantly making me feel like I need to go back and have this experience again?
Right.
And that if that doesn't set you down a path to trying to find some universal truth, I don't know what will. Because I don't know if I were creating the universe as some supreme creator, or I was just evolution evolving over time. I don't think what you and I are doing right now is part of the script. It doesn't seem natural. It seems like we're destined for this not to play out very well. Obviously, we're going to have fun in the meantime, but I don't know. This doesn't seem to work. It seems like getting in touch with nature, getting in touch with spirituality, getting in touch with community, culture, society, hierarchy, those things seem to be hardwired into us, where Zoom calls and podcasting and arguing on Twitter are very much the antithesis. So maybe there is something to that pattern that I think is very important to explore.
And the reason I ask these questions is not because I consider myself spiritual or religious in any traditional sense of the word, but because I find that I am at peace whenever I'm sitting on my front porch just enjoying nature. Whenever I'm working in the garden, or I'm working with my chickens, or I'm fishing, I'm experiencing nature. I'm part of something much bigger than myself in this situation. I feel much more at peace than I do at any other time in my life.
I think that feeling is what human beings have been trying to understand and explain since we have evolved the ability to understand and explain things.
Yeah.
And that's to me it doesn't have to be explored. It can just be appreciated. But I would like to do both. I would like to appreciate those moments and also try to understand why they seem so universally applicable. Like I took a bike ride today. I haven't actually been on a bicycle in a couple of years. But I happened to wake up relatively early for somebody who runs a bar that had a live band at it last night. And I went for this like 15, 20-mile bike ride.
JJ
And
Boogie
turns
play?
out the town he did not, but he's welcome to any time. Shoot me a DM. And I found that the town I live in has all of these awesome bike trails, and they weave their way through all of these little parks and flower gardens and meadows, and it was just beautiful. And you have to think to yourself, like, why do I find this beautiful?
Right.
And why does it seem that most people, or maybe everybody, finds these things beautiful? What is the reason for that evolutionarily? There's got to be some sort of truth that ties into that, because I don't think many people walk into like downtown Detroit on 8 Mile and they go, man, I can't wait. We should just really sit down on a bench and take some pictures of this for posterity.
Yeah.
You know, so there has to be something there that's worth exploring.
Yeah, no, I know, like when I'm sitting outside, you know, the dog's around me and a hummingbird flies up to the feeder. You know, my first instinct is to get my wife's attention and be like, look, a hummingbird. You know, it's like, yeah, I mean, she could see it too. Like, it's not, I'm not special in this.
I know what you mean, yeah.
But there's this opportunity to experience nature on this level, and I love raising chickens. I love messing with them because I'm experiencing nature on a different level. You know, I love fishing because I'm experiencing it on a different level. You know, I'm involved. I'm part of the process. And it just, you know, as much as people like push Christianity or whatever religion, I look at it and I'm like, you don't even have to go that far. All you need is to experience that I don't even know the right word, but that relaxation that comes with nature. Whenever you're experiencing nature, when you're part of nature, that's all you really need.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that would say, well, you're experiencing the metaphysical, you're experiencing the spiritual, you're experiencing
I'm
the
not going to
religious,
argue with you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure I would say that, but I try to see both points of view. And I think what they are is both points of view, or multitude of points of view, are all aimed toward the same truth and trying to figure out the same thing.
Right.
And inevitably, you may even end up in the same place. And when it comes to religion, probably the thing I'm least concerned with is what happens after I die. So it doesn't really matter to me if we get to the same place in this life, whether you're an atheist or a Christian or a Buddhist or a deist or whatever, or spiritual or a witch. You know, if we're moving in the same direction, we're all cool, because I haven't even gotten to the post-death part yet.
Yeah.
I don't really think about it. It doesn't really ever cross my mind. So, but I do think, like you said, being part of the process, or being like, you know, involved in it, there's something about that seems to appeal to everybody. And there has to be a reason for that. Like there might be a biologically evolutionary reason for that, a survival instinct or something. I don't know, but there's definitely a search for the understanding of it on a spiritual level. And I believe that focusing on that helps you find more commonality with the quote unquote truth than trying to pretend it's not a thing. And I find like what you're saying is just beautiful. Too many people try to find the differences in that rather than try to find the commonality. The commonality to me is really easy.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I brought hummingbirds up, because nobody ever looks at a hummingbird and says, "Oh, I'm going to kill this motherfucker and eat it." You know, like you're watching a hummingbird in its beauty, and it's showing this kind of like extravagant display, and you're just enjoying what's happening in front of you and the way that it's acting. And when you're trying to get somebody's attention, you're trying to get them to appreciate that beauty that you're seeing. And ultimately, the reaction you get from somebody who is seeing beauty like a hummingbird is, oh, wow, like, that's amazing. It's not like this primal, like, survival feeling within yourself. It's more of a, wow, that's really gorgeous. And everybody seems to appreciate that beauty to an extent.
Yeah. So that made me think of a story. And this was only a couple weeks ago. We had the doors open to the restaurant, and we were doing a little bit of like late night business because we had.
Wait, I thought Jim Morrison died. How did you have the doors open?
Jesus. That was pretty good, man. You like crowbarred that right in there. Pretty quick. So there was a lightning bug that came into the bar, and one of the drunk people at the bar tried to like swat it with a napkin. I guess just trying to be like a douche or whatever.
Right.
That'd be funny. And people at the bar were like, yeah, get it. And I went, dude, what are you doing? It's a lightning bug. What's the matter with you? You fucking stupid? You fucking retarded? Like, why would you do that? Sit the fuck down. Stop being an asshole. And right when I said that, all of the people that were cheering him on immediately just started chastising him. And it made me realize like how easily people are swayed by stuff. Oh, and wow. So when you were talking about the hummingbird, it was only maybe like 2 weekends ago that happened. And it made me, I don't know what to take away from that very small little anecdotal story, other than it didn't seem like anybody was sticking up for being a douchebag after somebody called him on it. Right. Like maybe there is that underlying, or maybe if it were the other way around, it would have been different, but I don't know. I mean, the dude felt pretty ashamed, and it was just a lightning bug, but I don't know. It's a lightning bug.
They're cool.
Why you want to fuck with it, man? Just sit down and drink your beer. Right?
Dude, drink a beer and have a light bulb shine in your ass. Like, I mean, come on. Like,
especially if Morrison's opening up. Shit.
But yeah, no, it's one of those things I look at, and I try to, because I like to write and I like to pay attention to how people interact and what's going on around me. I kind of pay a little bit more attention to shit that probably doesn't deserve attention. And so I notice like how many people love Indian paintbrushes or blue bonnets, and it's like, oh yeah, there's something here. There's something that we're all experiencing some beauty, like whether we cognitively register it the same way. Maybe we're seeing it differently, but we're all registering this beauty.
Yeah.
And so like there's something about like a hummingbird, a lightning bug, or certain flowers, certain weeds, that makes us, it stops us in our tracks and makes us like take a second thought and look at things a little bit differently. And I've heard interesting.
So much of the focus of my podcast is to point out abuses of power and how bad things have gotten and the direction in which we're heading as a society. And it can be a real black pill. I've partnered up with Richard Grove to offer my listeners an opportunity to sign up to his Autonomy Course. The Autonomy Course is designed for people looking for solutions, people that want to shape their own future, people that are not willing to be at the behest of large corporations or the United States government or the banking system. The Autonomy Course is designed for those of you who wish to have complete control of the reins of your life, who are looking to be successful, to thrive and not just survive, to provide for your family by utilizing your existing skills and learning how to market and sell those skills in order to be your own boss. or learn new skills in order to leverage that into a new career opportunity. So if there's a job out there you've been trying to get or you've been wishing you could get, but you just don't have the skills for it, the Autonomy Course is the place for you to start, to learn how to land that position, to learn how to market yourself better, to gain confidence, and to be surrounded by a community of like-minded people that will encourage you and help you along the way. So use my affiliate links and go check out the Autonomy Course. It could be right for you.
I've heard people say it's an evolutionary process where we are trying to find useful things in nature in order to like promulgate our own species. So if you see an ocean, you would see it as like a trading port, or if you see I've heard that's a terrible analogy, but you understand what I'm saying. There's some sort of reason, but
well, I was just going to ask.
I'll butt with you.
Wouldn't you find a bee to be attractive?
Yeah,
because it is necessary, and a bee is much more necessary than a lightning bug per se.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm totally with you. I was just trying to think of anybody who was listening that might be trying to play devil's advocate with us. I think there is something about the human mind that finds majesty and beauty and awe and wonder in the things around it. And there doesn't seem to be much of a reason for that, evolutionarily or survivally speaking. That I can tell. Maybe that somebody who listens to this can respond with why you and I are totally wrong about it. But
tell me why I'm wrong. Yeah, for sure.
It's either a complete byproduct of our mental chemistry, or there is a reason for it that's leading us somewhere, that we are meant to be part of something bigger than this. And I would like to believe the latter. I'll accept the former. I'm probably going to believe the latter regardless, because I just like it better.
Yeah. No, I feel you. And we kind of went off on this weird tangent. I don't know if
it's a good one. I like it.
I don't know if anybody's gonna like want to listen to that, but we have been going over an hour, and so I want to close, and I want to let you close everything down, and I want to like really get into detail about praxis prior to closing, and I want to let you kind of like lead us out with praxis, because I think this is something that people are struggling with, is how to interact with the world.
Well, what always really confused me or bothered me or left me uncomfortable with libertarianism was the anarchism versus minarchism debate. And I always found that the minarchists made really good arguments for the inevitability of the state or a state or government or whatever word triggers people. But where they would say they would promote minarchy, I would say, no, I would promote anarchy, but I would understand that minarchy is sort of inevitable. And this was like 8, 9, 10 years ago that this was going through my head.
Okay.
And now the more I look at it, I'm seeing this idea of libertarianism as a reactionary force or ideology to progressivism, but progressivism being the natural end goal of liberalism. So it's this weird double down, right?
And that was Burnham in Suicide of the West. Burnham was actually, he grouped liberalism and progressivism as one thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, because once you start talking about the right of the individual or the sovereignty of the individual, even if you try to hold God with that, you're going to lose it. And the inevitable outcome of that is that everybody becomes their own God. And so, yes, it would seem to me the natural outcome of the Enlightenment or liberalism would be progressivism. And then you have libertarianism, which is this reactionary push to get back to some past ideal of liberalism. Like liberalism has gone progressive. We have to go backwards to when it wasn't anymore. And I would say, I don't think you're going back far enough, because all you're going to do is just retard this thing back 200 years. So it ends up right back here again. I don't think libertarianism has the praxis to fix this. I just think you might buy yourself a couple hundred more years. And that's and that's a little bit separate from the idea of libertarianism being don't hurt people and take their stuff, because that seems to me to be a personal ideology that doesn't affect anyone else at all.
Yeah.
But that's up to the human being to decide what they want to do with. When you're talking about it on a grand scale, as if other people should be sort of sold this idea and grasp it, encapsulate it, and own it and become it, I think there are some serious social externalities to that, some consequences. Like Thomas Sowell said, there's no good or bad. It's just, I don't remember the part of it, what the exact quote was, but sometimes there are externalities to situations that you can't, they just happen, right? You can't predict them. You have to deal with them when they come. Well, one of the consequences to individualism is that it ends up where we are now, right? With this entire globalist, socialist, communistic approach to everything, where everybody's equal. There are no differences. Everybody's exactly the same. And that is a consequence of something that libertarianism as an ideology doesn't fix. There is no way to get past that with libertarianism.
Who was it that one of the founders had said that liberty required virtue? Who was that? Was that Madison?
I attribute that to John Adams myself, but that could just be because I read more of his stuff. I'm not sure. It could be any of them. It could be any of them, honestly.
Yeah,
it fits with all of them.
Yeah, he was describing the idea of freedom in a free world, and he said that you couldn't have a free world without citizens that were of high virtue. Basically, is what he was saying.
Yeah, I took,
and I think that kind of plays into what you're saying. Like,
I've taken the example from Thaddeus Russell's book, Renegade History of the United States, and he talks about a theoretical John Adams walking through the streets of, I think it's DC or somewhere, and he's just seeing like vagrancy and degeneracy everywhere. And this hypothetical John Adams is imagining to himself that self-governance will never happen unless these people have responsibility, have virtue, pick themselves up and act through some sort of virtuous, like life of Christ sort of ideal. So I probably attribute it to him just because of that story. But I mean, it's not incorrect. I just don't know if the end result will ever be what people want it to be. I find it at least marginally dubious. Like, I don't know if it's possible to get there this way. The idea of individualism entirely, it is my right. I own myself. I can do what I want if I don't hurt people and take their stuff. Like, that is really kind of cool as a reaction to the current situation that you're in, where you're surrounded by a fucking shitload of tyranny. It's really easy to say that, right? But it's not a universal given that that's some sort of truth that's going to get humanity anywhere positive. That's all I'm saying. Like, it's a great reaction to now, but if you were to achieve your goal, right? If that were to be a thing that was, extrapolated all the way out to the end, I don't think it would look very much like you think it would look like. I think it would probably end you up right back here again, perpetuating this cycle over and over and over.
Yeah.
Does that make sense the way I laid it out?
Yeah,
I've never actually said that on air before, so
no, it does make sense, but it does lead me down another road. All right, so and I do want to let you get off here because we have been going an hour, but I want to. There was a guy on Twitter that told me the other day that was like, your idea of individualism is preposterous. And I said, well, your idea of collectivism is preposterous. And I sent him Dunbar's law. Right? Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with Dunbar's law at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I sent him Dunbar's law, and I was like, a government this size, it doesn't matter what you feel about individualism. A government this size cannot cohesively operate. And so we have to get back down to a number that we can operate within.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Here's the one issue that I see being a problem is that there's a fucking lot of people. Like there's probably more human beings on the planet than there are supposed to be.
Well,
Just judging by evolution.
the problem is that people that need to hear about Dunbar's law block me for pointing out Dunbar's law. Let's just put that out there.
Super ironic. Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I, you know, when you take the radical decentralization or secession idea to its logical conclusion, I think many people in post-libertarianism or traditionalism or even NRX or even just straight up ANCAPs kind of would all agree that's a good place to try to get to. Because if COVID told us anything, if 2020, the lockdowns, the shutdowns told us anything, it's that you and I don't want to live with lefty loony bins who want to control us and fucking take our livelihood and steal our money and shoot us or lock us in a cell.
Right.
So why are we being forced to integrate with these fucking crazy people? You know, what so I would absolutely say we need to get more tribal. The problem is when you say that to these people who clearly do not want to live in the same fucking town with me, they don't want me to go. Right? It's like, it's, okay, you fucking
they can't live with
crazy,
you.
control freak,
They can't survive without you.
Yeah, like just let me go. I don't want to be around
It's
you.
a crazy girlfriend, man.
And I don't want to take over your land. I don't want your home. I don't want your business. I just want to be over here. But to your point, and you're 100% correct. And I know you're being somewhat humorous there, but 100% correct. They don't want to let you go. And so what happens when it comes down to secession or radical decentralization, and these fucking motherfuckers put a gun to your head and say you're not allowed to leave?
Yeah.
Let me ask you where libertarianism gets you there.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, and this is why you arm yourself. You know, I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way of saying it. This is why you arm yourself, because there are these crazy motherfuckers that will try to force you to be part of something you want no part of.
Well, Tommy, here's where politics can be helpful, in my opinion,
Okay.
because rather than, like I said earlier, kind of charging at the dragon with flamethrower, it is possible to use politics to maneuver people who are otherwise inclined to do certain things, to maybe do them quicker or in a way that's more advantageous to you if you were able to manipulate them in a Machiavellian way. And I did say that long form that way to kind of like bridge the censors, but there are ways to maneuver in the political system where you can get people to do things they were already going to do in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think that can be helpful in avoiding all out physical warfare.
Well, there's a reason I have two 90-pound pit bulls, one of which you've seen.
Yeah.
And they love me to death. They're not going to let anything bad happen to me.
and if it comes to it, I realize all of us are going to do our best to defend, I mean, our families, our loved ones, and our dogs. I mean, fuck, I mean, I don't think there's any, I mean, I've gotten into almost physical altercations over my dog at dog parks. Like I'm super fucking lunatic over my dogs.
Well, I have it's 9 acres.
What we're trying to do. Good man. I'm getting there. Bear with me. But I think there is a way to use the political system to avoid this and maneuver it in our direction, or I'll say in my direction as somebody moving on the right wing of the anarchist spectrum or the political spectrum. There's a way to do it politically that actually could prevent that and still get us to where we want to be. So that's where I think the politics comes in, but I don't see how that works in congruency with libertarianism. So that's kind of what I'm positing.
Yeah, and I've never like listened to one of y'all's conversations, whether you call yourself post-libertarian or not, and thought, oh, these guys are abandoning principle. That's never the idea I've gotten. What I've always gotten is kind of like the you did an episode on Abraham and how he was willing to sell his wife into sex slavery, basically, to the Pharaoh. But it was all based
He
upon
pimped his wife.
Yeah, for self-preservation.
Yeah.
And it wasn't only his own self-preservation, but it was self-preservation of his family and yada, yada, yada. And so I'm like, I'm looking at what y'all are doing, and I'm like, okay, like they're looking at ways to protect themselves. That's it. That's all I see. All I see is people trying to figure out, how do we survive?
Yeah. And trying to figure it out, hopefully, by looking at what's happened in humanity's past, seeing what's worked and what hasn't, and applying that to now, and not thinking that the Enlightenment just erased all of human history. I think that's important, that we're allowed to think past that backwards, to look at cycles and patterns throughout history and see what works and what doesn't. Yeah, that's probably the best thing to take away. Like, don't discount anything. People don't maybe necessarily believe the Bible is the word of God. If you just believe it's the word of humans, well, there's a lot of shit there that's important.
There's a
lot of shit about surviving as a
wisdom.
society that's super wise, that should be paid attention to. Well, at the very least, look at it that way.
Don't throw
rather
the baby
than just
out with
throw
the
it in
bathwater.
garbage. Exactly right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And I always tell my wife this. Like, she's like, she was a militant atheist when I met her, and I've always told her, some people need the Bible the way that some people need drugs. And you know what? Being religious has ruined a lot less lives than drugs has.
It's interesting too, because just growing up in the Roman Catholic Church, the people I know that go about Catholicism or Christianity in their daily lives don't have any real concept of the Bible compared to somebody who's looked at it exegetically, like really studied it.
Yeah.
I almost understand why the atheists think of religious people the way they do.
Exactly.
Because so many of them are just mailing it in based on what they've been told by their religious authority without ever looking into it as themselves. So I think Vin Armani is one of the people that says, you know, Christianism doesn't equal the life of Christ.
Right.
Just because you practice it doesn't mean you're literally living it. And the atheists do have a point there. They really do. But it doesn't mean that living the life of Christ isn't also advantageous.
Yeah.
So here I am trying to find #unity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to like call this one quits, but we're going to do this again because there's a lot of stuff that we can get into and talk about. And I think that's beneficial to people. So plug away, man.
Yeah, it's Yer Talkin Over Me. I spelled it weird on purpose, but y'all get the password. So it's YER, talking with no G, over me, spelled normal. And I'm Adam Patrick, and you can find that on any podcast or YouTube. Eventually, I'll have video up on YouTube. You can go to YerTalkinOverMe.com, get it on basically any podcatcher. And then any social media platform, it's I am Adam Patrick, because of course I am Adam Patrick. I'm pretty much only on Twitter. I do have Facebook, and then I have all the other ones, but I don't really go on them. So Twitter it is. Contact me, shoot me an email or something. I'm at protonmail.com. You're talking over me at ProtonMail. I love DMs. I love talking to people. I get them all the time. I always have great conversations with everybody who contacts me, and I really appreciate it. And hopefully I don't, hopefully I come across here as somebody who's willing to engage, ask questions, and not be a douchebag, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
And just for the record, he's much prettier live than he is on Twitter.
This is why I was trying to do just audio.
I'm gonna stop the recording.
Thanks, brother.
If you're gonna play this game of pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. They're all pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting reelected, and I find that strange. say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the things that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. But they all gather in the rallies and they chant their names, on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. Just 4 more years of war and taxes, 4 more years of them grinding down their axes. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Yeah, fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Cause we don't even need them. We'll never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedom. Fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. We'll never celebrate the tyrants that are taking